waiting is never never good in this market. Look, I'd say getting points on the board is just so critical. And even if they're not a lot of points, but you can show something's working, you can show some green shoots, I think is hugely important. You don't have to win the game, but you've got to at least show some progress. That gives you momentum. So get momentum.
Welcome to the Incremental Marketer, a content series where we meet with top marketing executives and leaders across industries to help you drive growth in your business. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Incremental Marketer. I am really excited about today's conversation. Our guest is Amanda Reierson, a marketing leader who's operated at scale across industries and across every part of the funnel. And Amanda has led growth, brand, and performance for companies like Farmers Insurance, Thumbtack, Yahoo, DIRECTV, and most recently as CMO of the fintech company Avant, where she launched and co-branded credit cards with Major League Soccer and other initiatives. Amanda also serves as an independent board member for Porch Group, bringing a true operator's mindset to the boardroom. And she's also currently consulting for Backpack Networks, a company committed to digitization in the commercial real estate industry. Amanda, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Paul. It's great to be here. Good to see you.
Oh yeah, good to see you too. I can't believe it's been how many years since our Yahoo days?
Quite
Just
a few. Yes.
Just a few. I think I saw you on that Southwest flight to Sunnyvale like pretty much every other week,
Yep, like 17
right? With your
times.
Yahoo backpack.
Yep. It was the Yahoo commuter shuttle. I remember.
So tell me your story. I know we worked together at Yahoo. You know, you've had a storied career since. Just tell us the arc of what you've been doing and what you're doing now.
Oh, thanks, Paul. And you've had a pretty good arc yourself. Yeah, so I've been in different roles, I'd say, across a variety of industries, which has been a ton of fun. I love learning. Certainly been on the media side with you at Yahoo. We were working across, all sorts of B2B solutions, whether it be upper funnel through to lower funnel. I'd say at Yahoo, I really got my education too as it related to performance marketing, really working with search,
Right.
launching the partnership with Microsoft back in the day. But really, I'd say the arc has been a lot through performance marketing and really being able to track investment dollars to outcomes, which is something that's really sort of stayed with me throughout my career. Also done a lot of work in digital marketing, digital websites. So worked for Farmers Insurance for a number of years, really bringing them from just sort of a TV and a radio shop into a sort of D2C channel with performance marketing support and a website that really sort of brought in prospects in, a time when everybody's shopping online. So it's been a fun arc, I'd say, from large companies through to smaller companies like Thumbtack, Avant, which you mentioned. Really, honestly, had a blast. It's been
Yeah.
such an evolving role too, which has been, kept me on my toes, and there's just always something to learn, and you got to move to compete.
Well, the CMO role has to be so agile to thrive, and you've done it. So talk to us about the leadership aspect of it. You've led these marketing teams inside large and their complex organizations. And fundamentally, where you sit today, what do you think is the hardest part of being a marketing leader right now?
I think the pressure to grow and the pressure to sustain and deliver on company targets and the P&L, and it depends on the product or service that you're selling. But look, it's a fragmented marketplace. Consumers, like everybody's competing for sort of top of wallet with consumers. And really, as a marketer, figuring out like how do you really drive your message through such sort of a cluttered marketplace, but also be very focused on that customer experience and ensuring that you're delivering for customers. So you think about brand. I think over the years, brand spend has been, okay, what are you spending in TV? What are you spending in radio? Sort of those top of funnel,
Right.
advertising channels. But at the end of the day, brand is all about that relationship you have with your customer too, and being able to deliver once they come in the door. And I think the role of the CMO has really evolved in that way too, of, not just through advertising, but bringing in lead generation, but then also conversion. And then what happens after that point to ensure that you're retaining that customer and those customers become your advocates. I think that's how
Right.
you sort of break through in today's world.
And I can't wait to talk about how to measure that. We'll
Yeah.
get to that in a minute. But yeah, I think on the big picture, You've owned brand, like you said, you've owned growth, you've owned performance and customer experiences. Resources are always in short supply. And I guess from your perspective, even if it's uncomfortable to justify in the short term,
Yeah.
when resources are constrained, where should marketing leaders be willing to overinvest?
Yeah, I do think any dollars that you can track to, again, sort of output in the P&L, whether it be revenue, whether it be sort of contribution to margin, that's got to be your top priority. And certainly, like best practice is that you're investing as a brand in sort of that top of funnel spend, right? That we all, it's
Right.
like the age old problem of, I guess, problem slash opportunity of how do you track those brand dollars through to, revenue and company targets. But I do think the spend that you can't necessarily, that's a little bit more of long game spend, it's almost as much as the P&L can take. And that at
Mm.
times has to be the first to go if you can't translate what's the dollar in to the dollars out, as well as from the customer experience standpoint, track really, what are you doing from a customer experience standpoint? What's the through line to retention and customer sentiment and interaction with your product? And those have got to be top priorities today.
Yeah, and metrics dictate those investments, but it's hard to get those metrics immediately from those
Yeah.
brand investments. Do you have these trust me, like Sushi Nozawa moments with your leadership team? Just trust me, this will work. And how do those go? From a brand measurement and investment standpoint.
When times are good, trust me goes farther than when dollars are tight, right?
Right.
But I do think as a marketer, it's important to show like what you know and what you expect and what you don't know. So when you put these, whether it's brand forward or certain campaigns together, I think it's really important to lead with analytics and show like, here's what we're expecting from these campaigns, but here's what I don't know. But here's when I will know if I'm right or I'm wrong, right? 3 months, 4 months out. It kind of de-risks the conversation because you're positioning it as a test and bringing sort of the leadership team along with you. And you may be right or wrong, but being transparent about that and bringing them through it as you get results in, I found that is been the most effective in big and small companies. It kind of puts everyone at ease of like, we're in this together, but we'll quickly find out if it's working or not. But we're kind of taking that leap of faith together and going on the information that we have.
Going to something you said earlier in terms of just the investment side of it,
Yeah.
you've had the rise of AI in the organizations that you run, and you're seeing it all around with your peers in the industry.
Yeah.
So there's pressure to show these operational cost gains from AI. What dynamic are you seeing play out there, and how is that going in terms of being able to save money, or is it saving money?
Look, there are some sort of quick wins there as it relates to content creation and sort of some of the lower tech integration
Mm,
um, disciplines. But I look at AI as a how to achieve certain outcomes. So, as a marketing department, you think about even like restructuring with respect to AI. I'm still a big
yeah,
believer that you have the fundamental disciplines in marketing, whether it be sort of brand and PR and sort of that growth, growth hacking, performance marketing, product marketing, those disciplines with the outcomes haven't changed substantially. What has changed, to your point, is how you get there
right,
and showing that you're using the technology and empowering your folks to experiment too and almost think of themselves as you might not be the creators anymore of everything, but you're certainly still the reviewer. So this concept of you've just got to sort of reshape your thinking on how the technology is helping you. You're not taking yourself out of the equation, but you're sort of reframing your role and bringing the team along with you. So it's not threatening, but rather we're all learning together. But we better learn fast or else somebody else is going to lap us.
right, right. And I'm remembering you have so many great stories from in the trenches at farmers and fintech, growing the Avant company and marketing presence. So knowing what AI can do, and you built those companies pre AI, how would you structure the marketing team differently, if
Yeah.
at all? And what changes first?
Yes. I think some of those entry level rules that are creating that content, that's where you have to sort of rethink things. But I don't know again if I would necessarily change the disciplines all that much if I think about sort of how the team is structured and what they need to accomplish and goals. However, I do think what's on their desk changes considerably as far as the
What's
tech
on their desk,
that
meaning the tech?
they're that's right. How they're achieving their goals, and then what that means to like the actual staffing model within those disciplines, I think we're all still figuring out to a degree.
Do you see it leading more toward in-housing or the apparatus of agency support that you've had
Yeah.
in some of these past roles and other third parties?
Yeah.
You've had lots of third parties. So do you think that third party support goes away and you can do it more internally? Or do you actually look for specialist organizations more now, given
Yeah.
how AI is playing that role?
I still think it's a mix. And I've always run a mix of in-house teams. Like at Farmers, we built a performance team largely in-house that didn't exist before. I do think a lot comes sort of in-house, but at the same time, agencies are still running fast to utilize the technology as well. And I think that's a partnership. So I still see a lot of value in those agency relationships if they can run at the right pace. And I've seen a lot of people step up because you need to. And if anything, I think on the agency side too, you're plugged into what are the trends, what are the compliance issues. You can be eyes and ears. Where in house, it's always that's just a bandwidth thing too. So no, I see a lot of value in the model, but I do think it's changing.
It does feel like agencies of today are tasked with being the pace setters and
Yep.
the innovators, even more so than they ever had,
Yeah,
just by the survival of the fittest. It's a
that's right.
competitive industry. What's a pace setting example that you've seen working with an external party that has
Yeah.
helped you go faster?
Yeah, I think on the analytics front and the media buying front, I do think those, agencies are setting the bar there to a certain extent. With that said, I think brands are also figuring out like how do you establish direct lines into the LLMs with data.
Hmm.
And so again, I'd say it's sort of a parallel path of leaning on the agencies, but then also, the in-house team trying to figure out like where do we need direct connections versus where can we lean on a partner.
We were talking about before this session about how do you hire for AI? Which skills are more valuable in an AI enabled marketing org? How do you hire for that talent? What have you seen work? Do you have any tricks in terms of finding the best talent in this market?
Yeah. So I've always, when I've sort of interviewed and gone out for talent, I think giving a case study or a project or something to see how somebody thinks, where you can have a dialogue about a business problem, is hugely helpful. Whether or not they use AI to get there and their output is up to them. But I think you can tell by sort of quality of output and speed. And at times you can recognize AI a mile away too, which,
Hmm.
by the way, isn't always the best thing, right? Because if you're going again from that all creator to also reviewer, they've missed something in the review portion where it's, you can tell that it's AI generated. So if anything, I think just wherever you can have sort of real world examples and they can get in and show you what they can do and how they want to use AI versus being prescriptive about it is where I've had sort of the most success.
What's your perspective on this year? Is it a good year for marketing talent to find great positions? Are people moving around? Are people staying put? I know it's
I'm,
early in the year when we're recording this.
yeah. Look, I'm really bullish on 2026, like full stop. I think 2025 was extremely volatile in a lot of different ways. But as I think the AI technology is settling a little bit and people are becoming more familiar with the platforms and have made the business case as to, okay, how AI can help bring down operational costs for an organization. I do think things are settling a little bit more and I'm already just feeling momentum in the market. I don't know how you're feeling just with roles and yeah, maybe people moving around a little bit, but sort of the creation of new roles and opportunities for folks.
Yeah, same. We agree. It's a very busy start to the year. Very, very good sign. Going back to your original pioneering in SEO work
Yes.
and performance marketing. So take your performance marketing hat and put it in the hands of somebody who now has to figure out AEO and figure out this LLM world. As we move toward this LLM and agent search and AI-driven discovery. How do you think brands need to rethink their positioning and content, demand capture, that whole playbook? What's new? What's different?
Yeah. So interesting. It's almost like we're learning again, right? So this whole
Mhm.
AEO world. Look, SEO doesn't go away, and I think if anything, a lot of the principles of SEOs, and again, tell me if you agree, sort of extend over to AEO of sort of findability of content and thinking through your website structure as well as all the content that you have out in the marketplace. So got to optimize for LLMs in parallel, right? With sort of pleasing the search gods. You're just pleasing more search gods now, I guess you could say. But,
Yeah,
LLMs present a really interesting challenge because the answers are there versus, clicking on links. So people aren't necessarily making it to your website. But if anything, that's where like bringing it back to the customer experience and like what are people saying about you out in the market and reviews, like all of that becomes, it's almost like the new branding, right? Of like,
yeah,
how do you show up in the answers in the LLM in sort of that environment is a whole new challenge for brands, but also a whole new opportunity. And frankly, a lot cheaper than television. You can
right.
get it
I know the convincing me to do something, my Claude partner, will be a little bit more persuasive than just a passive branding experience that I'm used to. It's like
Yes.
that's how I engage.
Right.
I want to ask you this. So, just measurement keeps getting harder, right? As more channels, more automation, less signal. Now we have this LLM layer, and we're thinking about where discovery happens differently. ChatGPT is launching a new ad product, so is everyone else. We expect, and we don't know what measurement looks like necessarily in this new world. So, what does good measurement look like today for a CMO making real budget decisions?
Yeah. That's the golden question, right? Look, I still think there is room for sort of your traditional media mix model, your attribution, as well as I always just have felt incrementality is really important. So put the haircut on everything. So you're really being honest with yourself about what's driving results. And I'd also say don't be afraid to go dark in certain channels and just see, right? And that's always like such a uncomfortable leap at times when you're trying to prove your advertising. I'd say have the courage to do tests where, you might sort of ebb and flow and see, what the overall results look like. And not being afraid, like just facing that head on, I think is sort of the new marketing. But again, it's you know, it- margins can be razor thin and sort of that optimization and the technology now. It is really exciting, I think, what tools marketers have in front of them versus, our Yahoo days. But
Right.
I
The
also look at
pixel
Yahoo as
based.
like such a foundation, right? Like everything we did in affiliates and search and database marketing. And I did like a database migration at DIRECTV, which at the time seemed so dry, but it really is like this data was like the foundation of everything that we do, what we did. And I did feel
So
like as a marketer, if you understand your data through and through, like that's where I don't know, things get exciting and things have just gone to such a new level now. It's a lot of fun.
what score do you give most marketing organizations for that question? And I totally agree on the Yahoo front. That was the four corners of the
Yeah.
foundation. So you're seeing organizations still struggling to get their data in a
Yes.
reasonably good place or even anywhere close to where you would want it. So what score do you give most marketers?
Gosh, if I was to give an average, and this is probably a better question for you, given where you sit too, but I don't know. I think the average would probably be a B plus. Like you've got those folks that have their sort of funnel metrics, D2C marketing, like it's a machine. In the
Yeah.
insurance space, certainly there were a couple players we watched very closely, and then a lot of these companies too that have a lot of legacy data. They're really trying to get it in a place where it's usable and you can automate and you can be feeding back real time information in order to inform bids. So I think depending on how new to the market you are too, and how much legacy sort of systems and data that you're saddled with, it's a harder hill to climb. But I
Hmm.
don't know. What grade would you give?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're B, B minus. I do think there's many A players, but there's a lot of C's
Yeah.
dragging the average down. Basically, between talent who knows what to do, technology that's actually useful for the moment,
Yeah.
privacy and all of the proper regulations around it. There's just so many hurdles to getting it right. So it's not easy. It's not like it's a straight A, easy test to take. But I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And it goes beyond, this is more the core foundation, companion to measurement. But
Yeah.
how do you just actually track that customer journey? Like, how many brands do you know that have a great loyalty program that's as sophisticated as the prospecting program?
Ooh.
Has there been a great example of that in your career?
Yeah. Look, I think it's a lot harder to do, the loyalty program. And why I say that is because you really have to have this value exchange for the customer, right? Of being a part of it. And I've done a lot of work in financial services, and that's really hard to do well. If,
Right.
certainly, you know, incentivizing based on, cash back and that type of thing, I think works. But like a true loyalty program where somebody feels like they're a member, I think that like sort of like the airline model, I think
Right.
is like that's the holy grail of loyalty, where you're accumulating points where there's like a true value exchange and they feel very valuable to you. So to me, like the airlines are such a gold standard as a consumer, and something like that feeling I feel as a loyal customer, something I try to replicate with the brands I've been at over my career.
It's a great example. Back to the measurement piece, the part about going dark in markets, our recommendation at Slingwave consistently is have a measurement plan, a learning agenda where you are doing those shock moments that are taking something out of market or the entire portfolio out of market for enough time to see the impact. So how has that been for you internally? Because there's a real revenue hit when you do that, assuming you believe in your marketing. How do you manage that and sell that in and manage the pros and cons of doing that type of testing?
Well, look, if there's a revenue hit, that's good news because it means your marketing's working.
Right.
So I would take that revenue hit all day long because it makes the case for just the investment from marketing and how you need to ramp it back up in order to sort of hit those revenue goals. On the flip side, if you don't hit, if you don't see any change to the business, you can hand that money back or reinvest it in something else. And that's actually a good message too of I'm actually divesting in things that don't have the right revenue return. And either I'm giving that money back to the company, which sure, as a marketer can sting, but at the same time, kind of, you're at the table as a business leader and you want to invest the money somewhere else in the company that's going to drive the metrics, or you can reinvest in different tests and other campaigns. But I almost think it garners a respect. There's good to come from sort of both scenarios, I'd say, with testing.
Makes sense. And I'm curious on your experience with the long lag effects of mid and upper funnel spend. Have you used a methodology in your career that's helped quantify that for you? The prove it moment that goes beyond 60 days, 90 days into a multi-month, multi-year measurement? How do you prove that brand works?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Again, this is the question. Look, I think when you have large budgets working for large companies, it's a lot easier to prove media mix and correlations of brand spend to whatever it is, units, policies. I think for smaller companies that are watching the P&L every single day, not to say the big companies aren't, but it's a lot harder to make that sort of long game investment and payoff. So it really does depend on sort of the size, the budget, and the scale. Now, one thing that has been interesting is if you just bite off smaller pieces. So with a smaller company, smaller budget, we've played with, one trying to own one DMA
Hmm.
and, doing brand spend there and seeing how that drives business. I'd say all like whenever I'm positioning a test, it's all about like what's sort of that smallest bite you can take off to prove your case and then scale versus the big bang. That's where sort of I've been the most successful is pace into it because it's no risk. You can roll under the radar a little bit until you can sort of prove whether you're right or wrong. And then you go in with the business case for sort of the bigger scale with something like brand spend.
That makes a lot of sense. We've seen that as marketing organizations adopt new channels is a natural place to introduce that test, right?
Yeah.
Anytime you're excited about the new thing, why not launch it in a subset of markets, right? So you have a natural geo experiment, causal impact study that you can measure it and prove it before you go full nation, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you are spreading it thin like the peanut butter memo from our old Yahoo days. You can't get anything done from something that's just so undetectable nationally. So focus it, prove it, and scale it.
Yeah, that's right. I've always been a fan of, get points on the board. Just
Right.
rather than talking about it and selling through multi-year strategies and spend plans. I think about this with technology too, is how can we just, and I guess it's a very agile frame of mind, right? Like just get some points on the board and then you can go around and make your big case. But what's the easiest way to try something and just get some points?
Great point. Yeah, and I wanted to go back to your farmers experience, and so you led digital and CX changes that drove a huge NPS improvement over time.
Yep.
Looking back, what was the hardest part of making CX a business priority, not just a customer one?
Yeah. I think, whenever you're doing something in the customer service or customer experience realm, it can be really hard, again, for that to have that hard line to the P&L and what you're driving. So
Hmm.
farmers.com, I think, was a 0 NPS when I took it over. So we had a lot of room to grow. Again, that's not anyone's fault. It was just more the function of the legacy systems and being able to set up a website where people could interact when you're, hitting on these brittle sort of policy systems and that type of thing. But anyway, when we were able to drive CE and drive people to the website and we tracked NPS, what we were able to do is track that to operational costs. So the more people that were coming online and paying their bill or entering their VIN number for a policy, that saved a call to the call center.
Hmm.
So you can put a cost savings there. So again, you have to just start sort of making your way slowly into it of showing like what are all these gains, and then at the end of the day also try to translate customer experience to overall retention impact. So I think that's the really impactful way to do it, but it takes a while to get there. So whatever sort of cost savings wins you can show along the way of introducing new channels, in this case it was digital, we found that to be effective with our management team.
So you've been both a CMO and a public company board member. Where do you see the biggest disconnect between how boards think about marketing and how it actually works?
I don't know, Paul, if I'd characterize it as a disconnect as much as when you're a marketer sitting on a board, it's like every board member brings their experience and their sort of personal discipline to the table. I think as a marketer, what I've found sort of rewarding is making sure the board's always thinking about that customer
Hmm.
experience. So almost that sort of theory of if the customer was at the table with us right now, what would they think? And that's not always the primary lens when you're making decisions, but it's a lens. And I think just bringing that sort of thoughtfulness into the boardroom is a helpful angle for the board to have, and the management team too, as you're sort of thinking through company trajectory.
That's really interesting. And I wanted to ask you this question from your CX experience and from your CMO experience. From a board perspective, when marketing underperforms, so you're a CMO and a public company board member, so you sit on boards, you see this dynamic. When marketing underperforms, what do boards usually blame or look to as the issue? And what do you think they should be looking at in that instance?
Again, I don't know that it's a board question as much as just overall. If you think about the company and management and when things aren't going well, whether it be growth or something else, I think, look, marketing certainly plays a role as it relates to quality, lead generation, telling the story, getting the brand out there, sort of upper funnel interest, conversion in a lot of cases, but it's also a partnership with the product teams
Hmm.
too. On like, what is the product we have in market? Is it competitive? Is our pricing competitive? So I think the role of the CMO and what I consider to be actually very rewarding is working hand in hand with the product team as it relates to sort of lead generation, And then truly like monetization of those leads, which can come down to what your product offering is and your pricing is. And if you think about growth, like the best growth plans I've put together have been in partnership with product, like hand in hand, just because there's so many components from sort of both groups to get the sale and keep the customer. So to the extent the marketer can come to the table as a business partner and not, just a marketer, I think that is when CMOs like truly succeed is being real thought partners in a growth plan with the rest of the executive leadership team.
Makes sense. Product market fit is so important, isn't it? And,
Absolutely.
and marketing's I've just always seen it's just this really terrible proxy for bad product market fit or bad solve when you have poor product market fit.
Yeah.
Marketing's supposed to fill that gap, and it's just never effective in that capacity.
Right. But marketing should be the eyes and the ears to the market, right? Of like, who is the target customer? How do we talk to them? What are we hearing? What do they need? Feeding that back to product. So marketing needs to be in front of the company, I think, that way and provide that. But then at the end of the day, the strategy is the teams together, making it all work.
It's a great point. Well, thank you, Amanda. We've talked about a lot, and I know just in terms of the small company versus large company dynamic and the year ahead of us. So with the backdrop of everything we talked about, what do you think marketing leaders should be doubling down on? And maybe what's something they should consider letting go of?
Look, I think in today's, again, day and age, it's growth, it's customer experience, and it's just relentless efficiency. So I think in marketing, look, we've all done a lot of different campaigns, and I just say, look, nothing's precious. It's all about like how do you adapt and move and bring the team along with you. It's just a little less about sort of theory and strategy and more about output and learn and move is sort of the way of doing business, I feel today, which
Yeah.
is it's a hard transition, but once you can get sort of in shape and run at the pace, it's also a fun challenge.
Well, that cycle has just become so much faster when we first started off on this marketing journey.
Agreed.
If a CMO came to you and said, our measurement isn't perfect, so we're waiting, what would you tell them?
Waiting is never never good in this market. Look, I'd say getting points on the board is just so critical. And even if they're not a lot of points, but you can show something's working, you can show some green shoots, I think is hugely important. You don't have to win the game, but you can tell I spend a lot of time in the basketball courts with my kids, but it's
Yeah.
you don't have to win the game, but you've got to at least show some progress. That gives you momentum. So get momentum. And to me, waiting doesn't equal momentum. Even if it's small momentum, that's whatever you can do to sort of establish that, I think is really important.
That's great. And as we look ahead, what's one piece of advice that you would give to a marketing leader? You probably get this question all the time in your advisory roles and board roles.
It's interesting. So you and I worked at Yahoo together a number of years ago, but I remember they had a mentorship program, and the gentleman who was my mentor, I remember we were at like a diner, we were at lunch, and he gave me the advice of a really good marketer manages themselves out of a job in a year. I was like, what do you mean by that? I mean, that's sort of scary. And, the self-preservation, kicks in, but I think it's really good advice in that things are moving super fast. Your team's learning, you're learning. But if you almost have that mindset of how am I empowering my team to be able to do my job and feel accountable for the same metrics, that I'm reporting out, I've just found that to be just uncomfortable advice, but good advice just as a leader and a certain mindset.
I love that. That's a great reminder for all of us. And not just marketing, any function. How do you make yourself essentially obsolete so your team takes it,
Right. But it makes you reach, right? It makes you reach
right?
for what's next for this role and how do I continue to grow it? So everybody
Yeah.
benefits.
Challenging as a leader.
Yes.
Amanda, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us. How can people get in touch with you?
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, no, this has been a ton of fun. I'm on LinkedIn and sort of all the normal channels. So, yeah, it's great to be here and really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Amanda. Yeah. And for all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on today's episode of The Incremental Marketer. Stay tuned for more voices like Amanda's, more lessons, and more proof that incremental moves can drive big growth. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and join us for more episodes with the leaders shaping the future of marketing.